Chapter West Africa for BASF West Africa Limited. BASF West Africa Limited connects 9 countries across the region. It's located in Lagos, and of course, it focuses on issues or in the areas of construction, chemicals, human nutrition and health, performance materials, core chemicals, crop protection, oil and gas, intermediates, and flexible packaging solutions. Dr. Rika, welcome.
Good afternoon, and thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us. Also here in Accra with me is Mr. Michael Buedi. Michael is the fundraising manager for the Ghana Integrity Initiative.
Hello, Sammy. Thank you.
Hi, Michael. Yes, great. Thank you for joining us. Of course, the Ghana Integrity Initiative is the local chapter for Transparency International in Ghana. It's a non-profit, non-partisan civil society organization that focuses on addressing matters relating to corruption, of course, with a vision of ensuring a corruption-free society where all people and institutions act accountably, transparently, and with integrity. Thank you very much for joining us, Michael. Also with us today, right? Also with us today in Ghana, somewhere in Ghana. I can't be sure whether he's in Accra or somewhere in Takwa or Bogo, so I'm not too sure. Is our good friend, Mr. Abraham Agbozo. Mr. Abraham Agbozo is Compliance Counsel at Newmont Ghana Gold Limited. Abraham is a lawyer and he is a trainer for Alliance for Integrity here in Ghana. He offers practical knowledge to enhancing understanding of complex concepts of compliance, and he's been doing this with the Alliance for Integrity for some time, of course, working with a mining company. Abraham, you're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Sam.
Right. So Abraham, Michael, and Jean-Marc are the 3 panel members who are going to help me do justice, the very subject matter that we have selected today. And I believe that it's going to be very exciting. I'm sure that you are expectant, just like I am. And at the end, we'll be able to have a very great time. As Gideon already introduced, my name is Sami Obeng. I work as Executive Director for Parliamentary Network Africa. Parliamentary Network Africa is a civil society parliamentary monitoring organization that focuses heavily on transparency and accountability. And of course, we are a part of the awareness creation working group of the Alliance for Integrity here in Ghana. For you who have joined us in the audience, please take note that this is going live on YouTube. We know that in this part of our world, our internet issues can be quite challenging sometimes. And so at any point in time, if you miss anything, you know that you will always find it on YouTube. The Alliance for Integrity will definitely share with you the links to these. And so feel free to join with your questions. Use the chat box to send in your questions. You can address the questions to any of the panel members as the discussions go on, or you can address it to all of them. If you're sending a question, please indicate your name, possibly your organization, the country in which you are joining us from, and indicate to whom you are addressing your question. So now, gentlemen, I would want to take your preliminary comments. Of course, in this preliminary comments, you have to make some brief statements on your perception or how you perceive the situation of the topic in which we are discussing, integrity challenges for private procurement in times of crisis, from your respective positions and perspectives. I want to start with you, Jean-Marc.
Thanks, Sam. Well, I would probably start from a high-level perspective. The leader that I am today and the organization that I lead today are very different from what they were 4 months ago. And a lot comes from having to navigate through completely unknown territory with zero visibility. Probably the best element to illustrate the point is, you know, when suddenly everybody goes on home office, when you lose physical contact with most of your organization, whether it's local, whether it's offshore, with your customers, your suppliers, your business partners, then there is one key point which becomes so critical, it's trust. And then if you have built that capital of trust, then it makes things a lot more.
Out edge that there will be no quality deficiencies in your due diligence process. And then I think counterintuitively, when you have a crisis situation, you tend to want to go with new and lift vendors. I would suggest that you should leverage, companies should leverage strong relationships with their proven vendor base. Those would be my initial.
Right. Thank you very, very much, Abraham. And of course, I picked from your initial remarks a bit about how crisis prevents convenient excuse for wrongdoing deed. And of course, this is heightened in the procurement space. You couldn't have said it any better. Michael, you work with civil society. Of course, your organization, local chapter of Transparency International in Ghana. What would be your preliminary comment?
Right, Sammy. Thank you for the earlier speakers. Indeed, Transparency International has expressed concern about the possibility and the heightened risk of corruption related, procurement related corruption in times of crisis in so many ways. These ways have been articulated by my own executive director, Ms. Linda Okorikwafu, who herself is also the chairperson for the advisory group of Alliance for Integrity. Now, it is true that crisis presents a heightened opportunity for corruption in procurement simply because of two things. Individuals craving for survival, most efficient frameworks of regulating procurement most of the time are relegated to the background because lives must be saved. These presents the opportunity for increased corruption risk in procurement around crisis period. In fact, the topic is wonderful, but I would say that as we discuss this topic, we are not limited, we should not limit ourselves to the private sector alone, because it is the corruption equation is the private sector supplying and the public sector demanding. Now, these equation balances for corruption to thrive. I say that procurement related headaches had been, or challenges had been with us for a long time, to the extent that by 2016, when the UK held the anti-corruption forum or summit, it's made procurement-related corruption one of the issues that ought to be discussed. Now, governments made promises. Our government, for instance, talked about increasing transparency in public procurement, i.e., ensuring debarment, and then also implementing e-procurement. These challenges are now, from 2016 till now. Now the crises are making these prescriptions very real and urgent that countries must adapt to. And as we make progress, we will expand and expatiate it a lot better. So I would say that indeed, crisis heighten the corruption risk in procurement, and it's simply because citizens who must play some oversight role are fighting for survival, and frameworks that must regulate corruption are relaxed and relegated to the background so that people's survival must be produced. And that is why procurement-related corruption is a subject we must look at, and that's why I'm excited that we are looking at it now.
Thank you so very much, Michael. And of course, the balancing effect on your corruption equation of private sector being the supply side and the public sector being on the demand side, and how we can bring that aspect into the discussion is quite an interesting one. Indeed, you have emphasized the need for us to strike a balance between saving lives in times of crisis, but also ensuring optimum integrity in all the things that. And I think that this sets a very beautiful tone for us to move into the main discussion for today. In today's discussions, we'll be zooming into three main aspects. We'll be looking at due diligence for different stakeholders. You know, these times we'll be looking at matters relating to procurement process, standard versus the procurement process, standard versus emergency process. Mike, I think you may have to mute yourself. Awesome. And then we will also be looking at risk of corruption between private companies. We'll be looking at these areas as the main broad areas for our discussions for today. And for my panelists, each question that I put to them, they would have a maximum of 3 minutes, to help provide some answers to these questions. And you can feel free to make remarks and to follow up on questions and answers from other speakers. So for you panel members, can feel free to, prior to your own submission, make some remarks towards the previous speakers has said, so we can have a very, very interactive session. So I will start with you, Jean-Marc, again. And in starting with you, I want you to share your thoughts on how to carry out the due diligence process in times of crisis, and of course, how to ensure that the reputation of companies do not suffer, you know, during these times, even as we do well to share their thoughts on the processes on due diligence. And this question will actually cut across for all three panel members. So I repeat it again, how to carry out the due diligence process in times of crisis and ensure that the reputation of the companies involved do not suffer. And of course, you may want to lace it with some good practices and examples that you could share relating to due diligence in times of crisis from your own organizational and personal perspective. Mark.
Well, one way to answer this would be, this is the very last moment you want to choose to bring in new business partners. And as a rule, we would refrain from bringing anybody new on board simply because the due diligence process cannot be executed the way we want. Just one example. I mean, the simple fact that we were locked down prevent any sort of physical interaction. And in my opinion, this is a showstopper in most cases. And now the flip side of this is, in a time of crisis, and particularly as we've seen over the past few months, you realize that the game is changing every hour, and there's a very much increased need for bypasses. And this is where you may, if you're not very careful on the way you handle this, you create opportunities for problems to happen. And so this is something that you deal with on a case, at least that we dealt with on a case-by-case basis. But the rule was simply, don't try to bring in anybody new on board simply because of the difficulty to execute a proper due diligence process.
Interesting one. Michael, would you want to take it up from here, from a civil society perspective? What do you think? Some examples you may want to share also?
Well, you know, like again, if we take the current crisis, it's a novel, so very difficult to look at examples readily. But I would say that there are various levels of due diligence or frameworks that allows for due diligence. We fortunately, various trend or global trends are developed frameworks that helps us to do due diligence or increase vigilance around crisis. And so not too long ago, the discussion around beneficial ownership disclosures are there for many of us too. So whether you're bringing in new entities or private people to supply or not, what you want to know is that who are behind those private entities. Are they people wielding undue influences? Because most of the time, what happens is that at these critical times, you would find entities or politically exposed persons who are privy to information, most of the time, setting up entities to take advantage of the situation. So what you want to do is that you want to ascertain as to whether, who are the beneficial ownership of the suppliers that you are engaging. It is critical. You also want to quickly strengthen your internal control measures. So at the private sector level, you're looking at beneficial ownership. At the procuring entity level, you're looking at internal control measures that are in place. Do you have internal control and internal auditors who have the capacity to ensure that these entities that you are procuring from have been complying to rules, are not corrupt, and the methods that are using are above board? Because here again, it's fluid and it's an emergency situation. Time is of essence. And therefore, you are likely to circumvent, or you are likely to sidestep certain measures or certain regulations. But as to when you are doing so, are the measures that you're taking above board? One thing that we should not sacrifice, irrespective of what approach or method that we are going to use, is transparency. You must make sure that you will cure every mischief by increasing the level of transparency at the time of emergency procurement. So at the due diligence level, you will look at beneficial ownership disclosures. Currently, Ghana, for instance, had passed the new Companies Act, which had included clauses of beneficial ownership disclosure. Register to be set up quickly, information collected. Fortunately, we have the right to information, but so access to information should be made, and then transparency is increased. When we do that, we are looking at ensuring that we'll be dealing with some of the integrity challenges that we may face in crisis times.
And you introduced the beneficial ownership disclosures and questions angle, which is an interesting one. And of course, spoke about the strength of internal controls procurement, which is one area that I'll come back to you, Michael, later on to check with you on some of the corruption risk, really, that relates to the purchasing process in these extraordinary times. But I'll go to Abraham to get his thoughts also on the initial question I have asked.
Thank you. So I'd like to Jean kind of touched on that I think is very important, which is that in these times of crisis, probably the most prudent thing to do, as Jean-Marc said again, is to stick to the vendors that you have a long history of partnership with. And I know that in these times, speed and urgency are premium. You want a vendor or supplier to deliver in the shortest possible time. And sometimes the vendors that you have, you may question the ability to do that. I think that when you try to sacrifice relationships with those who you think will bring in speed, you're opening the door due diligence that is not optimal, and that in the long run could spell trouble for you. So I think as Europe panel proceeded as collaboration with these people and transparency with your established vendor base to make sure that they are able to respond to your needs at that point. One of the things I'd like to touch on too is that in addition to speed and urgency, all the pre-qualification processes that exist in an organization should be followed. Should you want to bring in new suppliers and vendors? We do that here at Newmont. We haven't changed the pre-call process. We continue, one of the things we do is continue to take our high and extreme risk contractors through our supplier risk management framework. This is a framework that was developed to manage the risks that various and varied contractors bring to the table. I'd also like to touch on internal collaboration and engagement with all functions in an organization, because they bring to the table different viewpoints, and that is, these crisis times are the times that you need to harness their specialties. Finally, the risk of sounding ideal to the point of naivety, if you like. Corporations or private entities must make sure that there's an alignment of values between a contractor and your company. Now, that may sound ideal, but if you are able to do that, then you're guaranteed a decreased level of risk from these contractors. The other thing that we have done, I'd just like to touch on it briefly, is the systemized and regular anti-corruption audits. So what we have done at Newmont is, having developed a tableau of risk areas for our contractors, we then audit them, but systematically. And the idea is to make sure that whatever risks our regulatory environment suggests that we should mitigate, we are able to communicate that to them and help our vendors also bring their processes and controls up to speed. So, because you know that, for example, we operate under the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and any act of a vendor is seen or is taken to be the act of the principal. So therefore, we have an incentive to bring these contractors up to speed at the level that we want.
Right. Very well. And I think that those were also very insightful angles, in addition to the points that Mark made earlier on, relating to the need to stick to the vendors that you are already used to. And of course, like you rightly put it, if there is any need, should you want to bring on new people, you can't lower the standards. And thank you for sharing some of the Newmont examples also with us. So I think this sets the tone beautifully for the rest of the discussions. All of you, as you were speaking about the DD process, you emphasized of how it actually has a direct linkage with the procurement process, the standards, and all the emergency situation that comes with it. So before we move into our next set of questions, let me remind those of you who have joined us that you can send in your questions. Our team is on hand to compile these questions and we'll address them to panel members to whom you have asked that your questions be addressed to, and you should kindly provide us with your name, your organization, possibly your country, where you're joining us from, and each of the panel members you are directing your question to. So Michael, now having spoken about the issue of the purchasing process in extraordinary times, I want you to help us identify some of the corruption risks in these extraordinary purchasing processes that we should be mindful of.
Sorry.
Yes, Michael.
Okay, the line was breaking. Can you come again?
Okay, so I was just asking for you to help us identify some of the corruption risks, in these extraordinary purchasing processes. In these times of crisis, some of the
Right.
corruption risks that you can help us identify.
Okay, now I think in these times, in extraordinary times, like we've all agreed that you want to use persons or companies that you already know. It comes with the private individuals too. So you would find that, influence, peddle influences all over the place to get juicy content. One, because they are privy to information that many other people are not privy to. We are friends, we talk about things with our friends. So extraordinary times, the likelihood that, one could speculate the likely purchasing direction happens. And these influences cause. So not too long ago, I'm sure those in Ghana may have heard the contract for sale documentary that was aired. It was actually not aired during the COVID-19 era, though, but I mean, it shows an example of how persons with influence are able to, through access of information, are able to set up, entities, private entities, to get contracts. And so in this contract for sale issue, the head of the procurement entity is alleged to have set up a private company, and these private companies take contracts from state entities and resell the contracts to other contractors to undertake. So this is one of the risk areas. Now, issues of conflict of interest. We've talked about, politically exposed persons, and also having access to information are likely to conflict themselves. So it's also another area where these, another corruption risk area. There is also the issue of transfer mispricing. Ghana in 2012 was experiencing serious energy crisis, and therefore a contract was signed with a Chinese company called Sinopec. It is alleged that information or gathered had that the Chinese company set up another company in Dubai, and the company was selling equipment to the Chinese company here in Ghana. And what they did was overprice the equipment that were sold to Ghana. It's estimated to cost Ghana over $40 million. Fortunately, when this was discovered, the that is the Ghana Revenue Authority was able to recoup taxes worth 15 million Ghana cedi. That's about $3 million. Back as a result of the transfer prices. So transfer misprices. So that is also part high corruption risk areas that happens usually around emergency or crisis period. Then we can talk about in bid evaluation, bid rigging, bribing of public officials. These are just about a few corruption risk areas that are very prevalent during crisis period as far as corruption in public procurement are concerned.
Michael, thank you so very, very much. So having identified these areas of risk by Michael, Abraham, perhaps you may want to help us to identify or understand how to make the technical specifications of the emergency procurement in such a way that it does not generate contracts directed to specific suppliers. So as a lawyer and for somebody who is deep in compliance, how do we ensure this?
Come again. How do we ensure? Come again.
So how do we make the technical specifications of the emergency procurement documentation in such a way that it does not, we do not end up generating contracts that are directed to specific suppliers in a way that throws transparency, integrity under the carpet? Having identified some of the corruption risk areas that Michael puts forth, so that it's not like we are just doing this because we want specific organization to win the contract because of our own internal bias.
Okay, thank you. In one word, the key problem in an emergency situation is that the functions or stakeholders responsible for routine due diligence and mitigating risk in the corruption space assume that with the onset of a crisis, they can take shortcuts. Now, so first of all, the first thing I will harp on is training and communication to these functions that are involved in procurement, that we are not letting down our guard with respect to all the controls, mechanisms, and protocols available to mitigate corruption risk. Having said that, you also need to respond to the exigencies of the case, which is that by definition, because of the crisis and in a COVID-19 situation where a lot of companies are folding, a lot of vendors that you could rely on in normal times are unable to deliver. Your operations must also respond to that situation. Again, it comes down to expediting and treating as urgent due diligence and controls available, but doing that and still keeping the standard. So that if there's anything that you can do, which is critical in these times, to making sure that you don't drop the ball, as it were, it is communicating with your employees and making sure that you support all the controls and give the impression that all the things that we put in place actually must work. And in these times, one of the big things is price escalation. In this, a lot of people escalate their prices, the shoddy products, and bribery. And even if you identify all these three things, the one thing that you can do to make sure that you do not pay premium or extra premium for your goods and services, and you do not get shoddy products, is to make sure that all these procurement processes are subject to established processes and protocols that were in place in the first place.
Okay, so thank you, Abraham. I don't know if I am losing your connection right there. But okay, yes, you are with us. Okay, great. Thank you for those thoughts in there. So maybe let me pick your thoughts also, Jean-Marc, on these issues of how to ensure that the emergency factor the emergency factor obviously has an influence on the purchasing process, like we have all identified. But how to ensure the balance, with this emergency factor and between this emergency factor and the purchasing process. What would you advise from your own experience, Jean-Marc, if you are with? Yes, please.
Well, I can only echo what Abraham just said. You have to build this into your organization before you hit the crisis. And again, re-emphasize that there is no reason, no justification to go for shortcut or bypasses. And make sure people are very comfortable with this, that if we have to step away from a business, if we have to walk away, that's perfectly okay, because nothing can justify us taking that risk. It means that you have to be very close to the people who are the most exposed, and that you don't do during a crisis, because technically speaking, you have no time for it. You have to do that prior to that by creating, let's say, a culture which will make people comfortable. I don't think that the level of exposure during the crisis that we are still into it, was dramatically enhanced. It was the same as usual, except that of course you may expect more problems coming from an enhanced need for single sourcing processes. And how do you build this in? And again, this is back to the point that you have to think about it prior to hitting the wall. The rest was at least for us, pretty normal in terms of corruption risk. The dealing with regulators was probably the most difficult because, again, there were much less of them in action. Processes were dramatically slowed down, and that created opportunities for somebody who wants to play to try to create a roadblock and find a revenue for him or herself. But it was not most difficult. I think where we were very concerned at the beginning was, and how do we deal with emergency single sourcing requirement and the whole story of the conflict of interest, but that was not so much of an issue.
That's instructive. So now I hear all of us say in diverse ways that yes, the crisis has come. By all means, for companies that were prepared with putting in place their internal measures and building the need not to sidestep the processes and having compliance measures within their organizations before even this time of crisis will be companies that will be kind of better off during these times because their people are used to these kinds of processes. But of course, there is always the need to constantly communicate so that people do not drift away from this. We have said that in these times, you are better off, sticking with the people that you know, the suppliers that you know. Don't lower the guard if you have to even get new people involved. So let me now ask all of you, and again, within 3 minutes or less, what some of the recommendations will be from you as measures that can be taken to prevent some of these corruption risks that we have identified, these extraordinary purchasing processes. What are some of the measures that we can adopt to prevent some of these? And I'll begin with you, Michael.
Right, Sammy, thank you. Quickly, some of the measures would include, one, benchmarking. Most of the issues that had happened because people try to manipulate prices. So manipulate invoices to gain advantage. And this most of the time happen to be done in connival with internal persons. So the private person and some collusion with some individual will be. So there should be some benchmark prices that almost everybody in the game or within the procurement process at that particular time is aware of. This helps to control an individual or any collusion, so that the invoices or procurement process would be manipulated. Now we can also look at signing integrity part. So you would have to develop an integrity part between you and your suppliers and sign and commit to. And these integrity parts usually must come with consequences. I mean, it could go as far as the entities are debarred if they are found out or audit catches up with them and finds out that they engaged in any untoward hand dealings in the course of the procurement process. You can also look at developing code of conducts for both your employees and your suppliers. And these code of conduct must be very binding, except that sometimes it's very difficult placing sanctions within that. It's usually moral suasions, it's usually appealing to people's values and stuff like that. But so what that also means is that these measures must not be implemented in isolation. There should be a mixed bag of these measures so that you are able to ensure that the right things are done. Then you're also looking at sharing responsibilities. So I mean, there's a higher likelihood that shorting goods could be supplied in times of emergency. What you do is that you also document in your contracting process that in the event where shorting good is supplied, either prosecution or suit or some legal remedy or of a sort or the supplier will be held responsible, and this is non-negotiable. This sharing of responsibility must not only rely on the supplier, but also the staff of the organization or the private entity that is receiving these goods. You must ensure that that person is also responsible. That also would also happen only when you improve the capacity. Most of the time, we look at emergency situations do happen. They are emergencies. People hardly plan for them, but you see, as a good entity, if you build the capacity of your employees as if there could be emergency tomorrow, you reap the gains when emergencies like as we're experiencing now does happen. That is why we take insurance policies. We don't assume that there would be, we don't hope that there would be any accident, but in the event where there's an accident, you have an insurance policy. So the capacity building in our entities must be an ongoing thing as an insurance policy for times like this, so that at least competence would be leveraged to deal with some of the challenges that procurement corruption throws. Then probably you may also, there is a very interesting saying that, particularly happened in Ghana. They will tell you that, well, if you build the capacity of your staff, what if they leave? And I always respond by saying that, what if you don't build their capacity and they stay? Thank you.
Indeed, that is germane, a response. What if you don't build their capacity and they stay? Abraham, what sayeth you, sir?
So, well, a number of things come to mind. I think that on a very practical level, the supply chain function must monitor key commodities or supplies required to sustain operations. That way, you reduce the need to always be in emergency mode. If you are tracking a product that, because of the crisis situation, is in demand, and you're tracking for a long time, you're better able to source these products. Hence, you're able to reduce your reliance on emergency vendors, and you reduce your risk. We all have harped on working with long-standing suppliers with strong reputation, and I think it bears repeating because it's very essential in a crisis situation. I think that an additional thing I'd like to add is have in place clear processes and systems to control both flow of information and commercial documents and funds. Because if you don't control these three items, you're setting yourself up for somebody dropping the ball. Also, I'll just add a business code of conduct, as Michael mentioned, and a supplier code of conduct that are both contractually enforceable and consistently applied. Because you can have those, but the devil is in the detail, and your efforts at enforcing them. If you have those and they gather dust on the shelves, finally, stakeholders must be empowered to control the mechanisms, the protocols, and then people breach them. Now, if you don't address these breaches again and people go unpunished, then there's an incentive for the next person to try his hand at something untoward. So stakeholders must be empowered to report breaches, and avenues for reporting such breaches must be known to all, and then these breaches must be investigated and some kind of closure brought when this happens.
Thank you, Abraham, for that. So now come to you, Jean-Marc. Still on the same posting of recommendation.
I think a lot has been said. Trying to add some more. I like to work on the human element. Again, we have code of conduct, we have compliance training. I think it's important that people feel comfortable. You make it very real for them, so you go beyond compliance training, but you make people talk about what could happen, what they have seen, and you try not to create a culture of fear. It's okay to do mistakes. Okay, as long as you speak about it and we take it up. I think it's critical to provide an environment where people will be able to ask the question if they feel something is not right, either in what they are doing and what they are seeing. They need to feel working for an environment or with people where they can actually reach to and talk. And that's not trivial at all. There's an enormous cultural element in many countries, but I think it's important. And also just to continue, I mean, have your people aware that they are also supporting others, and that's all what I would have.
Right. Thank you very much. So now we'll move to some of the questions that have come in from those who have joined us. Thank you very much for sending in your questions. For those who still have questions that you may want to send, like I said, please type them into the chat box and indicate your name and where you are sending the question from, possibly your organization and all of that. Now we have a question. Okay, great. So we have a question that is directed to you, Abraham, and this is coming from Juliet Pajode, and Juliet is seeking to ask: internal collaborations are perfect, but what do you do when in crisis the collaboration is expected? The collaboration expected is not successful, you know. So what would be your word of caution? I mean, the collaboration is perfect. She agrees with that. But in times of crisis, when, you know, these collaboration efforts are not successful, what would be your recommendation to you, Abraham?
That's a difficult question. I don't know whether to say thank you to Juliet or not. But it's a tricky one. But you're right. Collaboration in an organization is probably one of the things, even in normal times. What do I do when the collaboration is not forthcoming? Escalate. I mean, the key question is escalate to the next level until you've gotten to the point where the person with ultimate responsibility is telling you this is not important and we are not collaborating. And collaboration is not important in these times. Now, and then this is when you leverage relationships you've built in the past, because then you try to bring other people into the conversation, other stakeholders who may not be immediately relevant to the situation. But I think your key goal is, given the situation, I need input from a plurality of actors. And you try to leverage relationships and prior relationships to bring that collaboration to bear. And if you do all that and the collaboration doesn't happen, then the fault is not in your stars.
Right. That's interesting. And Juliet, the questioner, is the executive secretary for the Critical Care Nurses Group of Ghana, and she works with the Nyaho Medical Center. Juliet, I hope that you got your question addressed. But the other panel members may probably want to add a word or two on that. Any of you who want to also speak?
All right. I mean, yes, just to add to what Abraham said. I think what Abraham said is wonderful. Escalate. The good thing is that in these crisis times, COVID-19 was able to wreak havoc to a lot of things, but those things does not include information. So every entity must make it a point to seek information, to scout for information, possible around the area of operation. And what together with better is that we are very narrow as to how much we know about our markets and our suppliers. We form relationship and we build trust, but we do not look at the possibility of the relationships going sour. We do very little about that because, particularly in our culture, whenever you are exploring beyond your partner's relationship, they would evoke the card, oh, why, you don't trust me? So then just by virtue of trying to, build or increase your information profile or your stock of information, that in itself can evoke another breakdown of relationship in itself. But however, I think that for looking beyond, or what COVID-19 should be telling us, is that we must seek as much information. And the more you know about situation, the more you are able to navigate your way where trust and relationships fail you. You are able to quickly fall on plan B.
And Jean-Marc, maybe you may want to add something, but if not, also you may want to also address this question from Andrew Fiati, who has also joined us. And Andrew is seeking to find out what role can IT or digitization play in reducing procurement corruption or risk in these times of crisis, Jean-Marc?
I'm not sure I'm the most qualified person, but but talking about IT, I think collaboration was already a topic before any crisis, particularly this one. This one, what is new, and that maybe the new normal, is the way we work. I mean, look at us. The first thing I would say, switch your video on. And that's what I would say to IT. Give us the capability to physically connect to one another. After 5 months, you end up talking to a wall. It means that from a purely collaboration perspective, you have to really understand what the others are doing. You have no other way to communicate to them. So collaborate is even in a much bigger task. So I don't know. I don't know how to look back to the second question on what could IT do. I think again I'm always thinking on where's the weakest link in all this, and it's when two humans agree to do something which is out of context. So you can build boundaries, you can build walls, but I think you have to really work on the human factor. And IT can help us by giving us the proper systems, which, I mean, blockchain is a typical example. I know during the crisis, signing contracts was an absolute nightmare, where you have to find a printer. Now you have systems like DocuSign and others where you can sign contracts in a very efficient and compliant fashion in seconds. That we didn't know about 5 months ago, and I think we would not even consider. So I think that there's a lot in that space, but again, there's always a human behind the screen or behind the keyboard, and that's the one I would pay attention to.
Right. Michael, in your organization, a few times, in your corruption fights issues. Maybe you may also want to share a thought or two on the question from Andrew on what IT or digitization, what role it can play in helping to reduce corruption, complications, or risk in these times of crisis.
Right, thank you. I think the IT does quite a lot. I talked about information flow earlier on. IT increases the information flow and makes it more efficient and faster. So that is one way IT can help. The second is that IT eliminates the human interface or reduces the human interface as much as possible. So where money changes hands and then the possibility of heightened corruption risk, when you have IT, say your digital payments and stuff, it reduces the risk, the corruption risk in that perspective. Then also, IT also, in our organization, we use IT quite considerably in reporting corruption, because in Ghana, people are just worried about, one, coming to report corruption physically for fear of reprisal and attacks, and also the cost of, boarding transport to go and report corruption and stuff. We've made reporting corruption a lot easier. So if you go to a Play Store or App Store, if you're using an iOS or an Android Play Store App Store, you would find Eye on Corruption. Fortunately, this app was built by Ghana Integrity Indonesia with the support of GIZ. So it fits in. It's a mobile app. You can just report corruption wherever you are. Anonymity is guaranteed. But the way it is structured in a way that if it's judicial corruption you want to report, if it's an entity, a public entity corruption, if it's an individual, you can even add video to increase your verification. So the IT, to a very large extent, is helping in dealing with procurement-related corruption and other forms of corruption. Let me also put a caveat here. IT in our part of the world is very expensive, so cost of data is very expensive, and it's also hampering the development or the use of IT to report to deal with corruption. However, as we have it now, it is a better option than the human efforts that we're putting. What we need to do is to support the role IT plays with strong commitment from duty bearers and also legislation that ensures enforcement of legislation, so that at least when the corruption is reported through whichever platform, IT most likely, and in the case and what I'm talking about, there would be an action, investigation, prosecution, and when necessary, sanction, so that it will serve as deterrent to others who may contemplate repeating same in future.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Michael. And I'll come to you, Abraham, to also make a comment on that as part of your closing remarks, because now we want to take some closing statements from you, our panel members. So, Abraham, you will address the IT question, if you may, and also give some of your closing remarks. Then I'll come to you, Jean-Marc, immediately after Abraham, and then Michael will follow suit. Abraham.
Thank you. Thank you again, Sammy. And again, Jean-Marc mentioned DocuSign, and for me, DocuSign was a savior. 3-5 months ago, no, way before that, before the onset of COVID, we're trying to solve a problem. So, as you can well imagine, in the compliance phase, there's an avalanche of documents or approvals that you need to do in our interactions with various stakeholders. We're trying to digitize that because the hard copies were becoming a nuisance. And we actually had a project ongoing to see how best to do that with IT, and then came DocuSign. And that makes, as those of you who are users of DocuSign know, it makes virtual approval of documents very, very easy. So I've become a champion, an advocate of DocuSign throughout the company. But this is what IT can do. IT that is responsive, IT that is at the cutting edge. So there's no denying the essence a good IT department and a proactive IT personnel in a company such as ours. Closing remarks. Thank you very much. This has been educative for me. Thank you for the panelists, and thank you for to GIZ and all the partners for this forum.
Right. Thank you very much, Abraham. To you,
everyone, particularly the organizer, for bringing this together. We operate in highly complex, even hostile environment, and the ability to share and to exchange is critical. I think when you get a crisis of that scale, and we are just at the beginning of it, I mean, the ability to connect and engage is absolutely vital. So I think this is for me the outcome of this workshop, but also why we are so motivated in participating and supporting such initiatives.
Right. Michael?
Well, thank you,
Hello,
Jay.
Michael.
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
Right.
we can.
Yeah, thank you, the organizers, GIZ and Alliance, and thank you to my co-panelists. You did wonderful. What we must all agree, or what we must all know, is that diverting resources meant for the poor and the vulnerable during crisis period to individual and private pockets is the most inhumane thing that anybody would be doing or would do. We must be each other's keeper, but in crisis times, the call to be each other's keeper is most important and must be most loud. The integrity of procurement is to ensure that lives are safe, development is enhanced, and corruption is minimized. We say that where there is 0% corruption, there is 100% development. We must all ensure that we can and we should and we must uphold integrity in our lives in everything that we do, whether you're a private person or a public person. We are in this together. If you save one life, I believe you have saved a generation. And in the event where you become a victim of corruption, download the Eye on Corruption app and send the corruption complaints and integrity initiative with the leadership of Linda Operekwa, who will lead the process and get remedy for you. Thank you very much to the organizers again. Thank you, Sami. Thank you, Abraham. Thank you, John. Thank you, Gordon. Gideon, sorry.
Right. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Jean-Marc. Thank you, Abraham. And thank you to you, our distinguished guests who joined us. Of course, I just need to remind you that this has been part of the virtual discussion integrity marathon that is happening across the globe, brought to you by the Alliance for Integrity on integrity challenges for private procurement in times of crisis. If you didn't know before today, let me let you know that the Alliance for Integrity is a business-driven multi-stakeholder initiative which is seeking to promote transparency and integrity in the economic system. And to achieve this goal, the Alliance for Integrity fosters action of all relevant actors from the private sector to the public sector and civil society. The Alliance ensures that it creates a platform that offers practical solutions to strengthen the compliance capacities of companies and their supply chain. That's why this is at 2 o'clock, the 2 o'clock 14 hours GMT, will hand over the baton in Africa to the folks in Brazil, where they will also take it up and run with it. And if you have the opportunity, I'll encourage you greatly to join us in that one also as we take it up from there. My name is Sami Obe, and I thank you all very, very much for joining us. Let me reiterate that on our summary points have been put up there, which I completely associate with. And if you are in doubt of any of the main issues that we have actually mentioned here, please remember that we are in times of crisis. These are very difficult times, the times when we have absolutely no control over the territory. We have very, very little visibility in this space that we are navigating. But at least the good thing about this is that we have partners that we have worked with over the years as private companies, and our panel members have given us very good reason to know that these times you want to stick with these people, not lowering your guard, not lowering your compliance arrangement, not lowering all the things that you have put in place to ensure integrity. but ensuring that you'll still keep to that torch of integrity. Let integrity reign on. Thank you all very, very much. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you to Alliance for Integrity Ghana office, the global office, Gideon, and the team. I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to work with you on this. My name is Sami Obi. Enjoy your afternoon. Goodbye.
Thank you, Sami, and goodbye. Thank you, everyone.